My name is Shellby. I'm the chair of the Athens Democrats. This is our monthly meeting, and it's a town hall on data centers. We have a handful of great speakers here tonight with us. So first we'll get an overview on data centers by Science for Georgia. Then we will have a presentation on the history of data centers and environmental justice in Athens, as well as local developments on them. Next day, we'll get an update on data centers from the state legislature, what Senate bills, House bills are being proposed, going to committees up to vote. And then we'll get the current status and upcoming votes that are happening with the Public Service Commission with our newly elected commissioner, Peter Hubbard. And then we'll go over what you can do locally. All right, I know we have some new folks in the room, so I'll start with who we are. We are the Athens Democrats. We are a group of folks in Athens who are dedicated to electing Democratic candidates in Athens-Clarke County. That can kind of mean a lot of things. So yes, we get out and we canvass, try to get out the vote as much as possible. We also volunteer. We've been co-organizing protests recently. We hold forums or town halls such as this. We try to find poll watchers. We recently developed a platform and passed it, which is harder than you would think with 50 people in the room. We fundraise. We support groups that align with our values. We engage with the state party, all of those things. If that sounds super, super fun to you, you can always join us. And now our guests. We have Olivia with Georgia for Science. She's going to go first, and then we'll have some of our other speakers. Give it up for Olivia and Science for Georgia. Yay!
Hello, everyone. I'm very happy to be here today. I'm Olivia Asher, and I'm a volunteer with Science for Georgia, and I'm going to give you a background on what data centers are. But before we get into that, let's talk a little bit what Science for Georgia is. Is it? Oh, there we go. Okay, lovely. Science for Georgia, we are a statewide nonprofit, and we focus on science communication. So we teach scientists how to communicate better. We also do adult science education. So, for example, we have comedy nights where scientists will try to become comedians. We also will have educational lectures and different opportunities to get involved. And then the third thing that we do is advocacy. So we ensure that science has a seat at the table when policy decisions are being made. We want science-informed policy in the state. Now let's get into what are data centers. So data centers do make a lot of things that are in our everyday lives possible. So whenever you store photos in the cloud, a cloud is not a real cloud, it's actually a physical location, a data center. A lot of scientists like myself use data centers to do our research. So we need them to, analyze genetic data and make research breakthroughs. Then the data centers that you hear a lot about on the news tend to be data centers powering generative artificial intelligence. So those are things like ChatGPT or AI-generated photos and videos. And those data centers are quite different from the ones that are used to support photo storage and research. They're much bigger and use a lot more resources. Here's what's going on inside of a data center. So we have a big windowless building, and inside there's going to be compute technology. So that is the computers that are responsible for running the algorithms and all of the computational function. There'll also be storage devices to hold data. Those don't use particularly much power. Then you'll have network devices to connect all of the different computers together. And finally, these computers get really hot when they're running these computations, so you need to have cooling systems to make sure that they don't overheat. And the cooling and the computing are the parts that take a lot of resources. Here's another picture of a data center And data centers, a lot of people like them because they think, oh, technology, we want to be technologically advanced. This is going to be great. We're going to bring jobs to the community. But really, a single data center brings fewer long-term jobs than a McDonald's. They might bring a lot of construction jobs, but after that, once they're up and running, there's only a handful of stable jobs that these are going to support, and they're not similar to something like a factory where there might be a lot of investment in the local community. Here's some facts for Georgia. So why is Georgia even getting so many data centers? It is because we have affordable land, affordable power for data centers, not necessarily the people, good internet connectivity, and compared to a lot of these very dry states, we do have more water. However, Georgia is hot, and data centers in Georgia need a lot of cooling during the summer to make sure that they don't overheat. And a lot of times companies that are putting data centers in Georgia are buying land that is unaffordable, so they're kind of pricing out other contenders. If you're near a data center, here are some of the impacts that you will see. So if you're right by it, you're going to probably have some noise and light pollution. Data centers can be very loud. If they're not properly graded, you might end up with water runoff issues as well. When the power goes out, they need to go on backup generators because the computations running on these centers, they cannot stop in the way that they are currently set up. So if the power goes out or there's a drought, oftentimes the data centers are going to be first priority, and backup generators can be polluting. This can cause strain on water resources. Additionally, because of the amount of power that data centers need, there's a likelihood that new transmission lines will need to be installed. There's some people in Georgia who had this happen to them where, part of their yard now became a transmission line for a data center, which can then affect their property value. So for the big picture in Georgia, basically we're looking at huge amounts of power generation necessary to power proposed data centers that are going to have all of these impacts on our local communities. Here's what we're looking at so far in Georgia. So this is a map featuring all of the data centers currently confirmed in the state. As you can see, most of them are in Atlanta. So Atlanta may not be getting that many more because it's so full already. And they're kind of starting to branch out into other areas of the state. The yellow triangles you see are more in rural areas. Those are kind of a cousin of data centers, crypto mines, which are responsible for mining cryptocurrency. They also use a lot of power and water, but today we're mainly focused on other types of data centers. Why is it doing the wrong way? Okay. Here are some numbers. So currently there's 97 data centers in Georgia and 42 that are planned. And these data centers we already have are using huge amounts of power and water. If all of the planned data centers and crypto mines are built, they will use more power than all of the homes in Georgia. And we do have some fact sheets at the sign-in with all of this information on it if you want to take it home with you and mull over it. Now, oftentimes states will give data centers tax breaks in order to set up shop, and this results in lost tax revenue. So Georgia has lost a lot of tax revenue thanks to tax breaks for data centers. Most of this is at the state level. It seems that localities often still receive property taxes from the data centers, but they're losing other taxes at the state level. Now, think about all those 42 data centers that are planned and potentially even more. In order to power these, we need to increase our generating capacity in the state. So in this figure, I'm showing you all of our current power generating capacity in white, and then the rest of it is what we need to start producing and the sources of that power. So when you look at this, you can see, one, we're almost needing to double our generating capacity by 2031 to support data centers, and most of this power is coming from polluting sources. So this is going to have huge impacts on the environment and on air quality, and things like that. Additionally, we need more, this also goes along with a proposal for an expanded gas pipeline across the state. Now, the question is, do we really actually need that much power? That's sort of what Georgia Power is saying, but are their predictions correct? Do we really need to, almost double our generating capacity so quickly? So a recent study came out from Science for Georgia, kind of double checking their estimates of the power generating capacity. You can read the full study online if you're interested. And what we found in the study, let's see if the slide changes. Yes, is that the utilities are really overestimating the amount of power that we need to generate. So they're assuming that like every single data center that said, I might want to set up shop in Georgia is going to come true. But when we run more conservative simulations, then we can see that most likely we're not going to need 10 gigawatts of expansion. We're going to need something more like 3.5 to 5.5 gigawatts. And that's if like data centers are continuing to be developed and use the same amount of resources that they're using today. So the utilities are likely overestimating the amount of power generating capacity we need to develop for data centers, which means who's going to be paying for that expansion in the end if the data centers don't come? However, there's hope. Don't worry. So first of all, data centers, they can become better. They can become more efficient. There's many different ways that we can do that. So we can work on our algorithms to make the computations that are running in these centers more efficient. We can also do something called load balancing, which is where you make sure that the computations being run are well distributed and using the resources efficiently. Sometimes that means that people have to wait in line to get their computations run, which is why that is not implemented. But if we make them do load balancing, then that could be a great solution. And we can also see more advancements in efficiency and cooling and so on. So they have capacity to improve. At the local level, what we can do is develop strong data center ordinances that will set guidelines of what data centers can do in your local community. I think Dr. T will be talking more about that, what we're doing with that here in Athens. But Science for Georgia has a lot of resources on what should be in a good data center moratorium, and we have that on our sheets outside. And oh wait, I'm gonna go to the last slide. Oh, my goodness. Anyway, Georgia has choices. We can implement these moratoriums that control data centers, or we can kind of continue on the path that we are on right now, which is highly negative. So things that we can do at the local level, for example, are set regulations on the water use or require energy use reporting, set up community benefit agreements, and make every single data center have a special land use permit, so community feedback will always be incorporated before one is built. And that's all I have for now, but you can get more resources from our data center toolkit here by scanning the QR code. You can also go to this website, and again, we have informational material in the back. Thanks so much. Oh yeah. And now Representative Eric Gisler.
This is way too small for me. Okay. Hi, everyone. How are you? Fair warning, I just saw these slides for about 5 minutes earlier this morning, so we'll do our best to get through them. Oh, I have to push the button. Yeah, I'm Eric Gisler, new representative, District 121. Okay, yeah, so the campaign was kind of a whirlwind, right? It was about 6 weeks from start to finish. I ran on affordability, and you might ask, what does that have to do with data centers? Well, and I think Peter Hubbard's going to talk a little bit to give you a little bit more detail on this, but basically, all that build out that Olivia just talked through is going to lead to higher, electricity bills for residents, according to the current plan. So that's a direct connection there. I forgot what was all. Oh, it fell down. Did I unscrew the wrong thing? Okay, this is better. Okay, so again, been a long day, guys. Looking at what we need from the legislative level to try to rein this stuff in and focus on affordability, this center section kind of touches on it, right? A consumer watchdog, we had one in the state of Georgia until about, I think, 2008. They stopped funding that and finally just got rid of it, so that's certainly something we need to bring back. I think the argument at the time was that the Public Service Commission was doing that, but as we've seen with Republican control of the Public Service Commission for the last several years, a couple of decades, I guess, it hasn't been the watchdog that we need. So that is certainly something we need to bring back. Strengthening ethics rules for PSC members. One of the things how many of you guys follow Patty Duran's newsletter? Any of it? If you're not, it's great. She can be long-winded, but she's fantastic. She does all these great, or maybe she won't anymore, I don't know, but she had all these great photos where she would draw lines from this attorney is paying this person this much money, and this lobbyist is paying them this much money, and you can follow that money trail, and it is legal, but it's not very ethical. So that's certainly something we could do at the legislature as well. And then real transparency. That's another way to approach this that I think there are a couple of bills we're going to look at here in a minute that are taking the first step at that. Transparency in terms of just telling us what you're using in terms of energy, in terms of water, just so that people know, right? So we'll move on. Okay, so these are a lot of the bills that are currently going through right now, and I'm not intimately familiar with all of them, but I have they are ringing some bells. So making big tech pay their own way, this is something that would require these data centers when they're coming in, rather than relying on fossil fuel generation and transmission over distances, they would need to bring their own power when they build these data centers. That could be a number of things. Ideally, it would not be just burning generators on site. There are other options. There are solar panels, obviously. I've heard talk of maybe like smaller, I forget the exact terminology for it, but smaller nuclear reactors, or I guess not reactors, but things that could generate power through nuclear right there on site. One thing I know I've spoken with Peter about a little bit is the concept of Beyonce. And as a legislator from Athens, I would love to drop a Beyonce bill. But what that is bring your own clean energy. So if you want to come and build a data center somewhere in Georgia, you need to generate your own power as much as possible, maybe up to a certain threshold, and that would help decrease reliance on the grid. Right. Sunsetting the tax incentive. So I know Olivia just talked a little bit about how the state has given up a lot of taxes, right? And local governments have given a lot of tax abatements and kind of missed out on a lot of the tax revenue that comes with these data centers. And the University of Georgia, the Carl Vinson Institute, just released a study a couple of weeks ago about it's coming out and saying that 70% of the data centers in the state of Georgia would most likely be here even if they didn't get the tax credits. So we've really kind of overplayed our hand there to try to attract data centers and make Georgia, I think, the number one state in the country for data center growth, and giving up a lot of tax revenue in the process, which is hurting the state. And even at the local level, a lot of local governments I've heard have been giving tax abatements on those property taxes because they do generate a fair amount of property taxes, and that can be a benefit. But it's not much of a benefit if you're giving away all the potential revenue and abatements. What is the last one over there? Statewide moratorium. That's Representative Roman Rua's bill. I think it's a 2 or 3 year moratorium. It's not a very long time period, but just I've talked to her on the floor about this bill. It's really, the point of it is really just to take a breath, right? Just stop things for a little bit, figure out the right way to go, and then continue on in a better path. Not a bad idea, but of course, Democrat bills don't go very far in the legislature, so until we take the majority next year. Resource transparency. I really love this idea. We talked about it. I did some research on this on my own. I thought about dropping my own bill, and I know there's the one in the Senate. But if they're just, like we said a minute ago, just transparent about how much water they're using, how much energy they're using on the grid, then it lets us all keep an eye on it, and gives local communities a say in when it's getting out of hand, right? We talked about the Consumer Utility Council. This is the public, public defender. This would be the consumer watchdog group that's keeping an eye on these guys. Now that we have Peter and Alicia Johnson, Dr. Johnson, and the Public Service Commission, we might be able to start relying on the Public Service Commission to do that a little bit more than we have been in the last couple of decades. But it never hurts to have more consumer watchdogs in government. So. What was the other one's a resource transparency too? Okay, we'll move on. Do any of them have a chance? So Senate Bill 34. So one thing, some of these bills might even be Democratic bills. I'm not sure in the Senate who is carrying these. But I am hearing when I'm talking to Republicans in the legislature that they're hearing the same complaints, right? From their local governments about data centers, from people in their neighborhoods, from people who are directly impacted. I think Olivia said there were 97 data centers in the state already, so they're already having an impact. I know I've seen news stories about people in somewhere near Fayetteville, maybe somewhere down that way, where they go and turn on the water in their house and they just get a little drop sometimes because the data center's sucking up all the water. So they're hearing that too. So with the Republican Party and the majority in the legislature and in the governor's office, we really kind of have to follow their lead. So they are open to some of these things, and we're doing everything we can to try to get them to get in line and push some of these things over the line, especially the tax credit. They really see the opportunity there. Tax exemptions. Okay, what do we have next? Oh, what did I say here? Okay. So those bills, they're getting into committees, especially so I'm learning everything's connected, right? And so we've all seen some pretty crazy tax bills coming through the legislature already this year. If you're paying attention, they want to get rid of basically everything. The thing is, they can't do that without a constitutional amendment, and constitutional amendments require 2/3 votes in both chambers. So they need Democratic votes. So we have a unique opportunity this year to put pressure on them to get bills through committees, onto the floors, get passage. Still not going to vote for some of those crazy bills, but it gives us a little bit of leverage. But you can definitely call and you can send the emails. Those messages do get through. Everyone I've talked to says, they see those messages come in, they see the phone calls, they keep track of who's asking for what, and everyone is very responsive to constituents. So definitely reach out to your representative, your senator, let them know, even if they're on the other side of the aisle, let them know you care about this, because I guarantee you when it comes to the data centers and what's happening with the resources and the costs and everything, they're paying attention, no matter which side they're on. I'll say I won my election on affordability, an affordability message. It was huge. I think, Peter ran on that. Dr. Johnson ran on that. It really resonated. The Republican Party is trying to take that and turn it into tax cuts for the rich, which is not the affordability I was running on. But it definitely got their attention. And so when you call your representatives, and I guess out here it's probably Frank Ginn in the Senate, Trey Rhodes, I think, in the House, call them. If you're in Winterville, call them up and let them know that you want to see some action on this, and some of these things can't get over the line. So I guess Am I passing it on to the next one? Who is next? Here? Oh, okay. All right, so I guess next up is going to be Dr. Mattox.
Keep going. Okay, right there. Okay. Thank you for your patience. Okay. I'm Dr. T. As many of you know me from the community, and if those of you who don't, I'm a resident. I'm someone who just want what is best for all of us. I grew up on Pitter Road, which is located near the data center that's here now. And I want to start off by paying homage to two people, which, really gave me this burning desire to keep a long-term fight going. Because it didn't start with the data center. It started before that, and the data center has compounded an urgency in our community to ask for better. So on the left side, you will see my grandmother, my mother's mother, Anna Mae Anderson Donahue. She was offered to purchase land in the late 1948. It was all rocks and dirt, and the white man who owned it didn't think it was nothing. You want to buy it, you can buy it. And so in 3 years, she did that. And then furthermore, she made sure that poor people in the community who needed land to build homes for their families, that they would have an opportunity to have hope and to have and generate a quality of life. She didn't buy the entire street, but she bought a lot of the street, and Pitter Road and Star Drive. And so those families, they became our family. We grew up together, and we're still close to this day. On the other side is my sister Stacy. My grandmother, once when she died, her children, was offered to sell some of their land, a piece of it, small piece to DuPont, and they, so they did that. And not knowing that, years later, that there would be over 31 people in the community that would become ill or die from cancer. There was a fight that started in the early 20s. My sister was the person that was one of the ones leading that. The community kind of got divided within itself. It died down, and she kept going with a environmentalist who was an environmental victim. Her name is Jill. And so they began to do more research and to continue on. And then Stacy got sick. She kept coming back saying that, they say I have pneumonia, but only to find out, much too late, that she also had succumbed to lung cancer. And so I wasn't here when she was doing a lot of the fight, but she would keep me in the loop with everything that was going on, and sometimes I would be on calls with her. And so just a timeline, and I just want to humanize this, and that's the only way I can come to you all in any data center talk or any environmentalist, to let you know that we are real people. And as these decisions are being made, I want, our mayor, our commissioners, our planning director, our planning committee, I want them to think about the real voices and faces. Because what Olivia provided, it is awesome. We need that data, but we also need for everybody to see the reality of people who grew up in a neighborhood, thought they were thriving. It looked poor on the outside, but we were not, and now to watch our family and loved ones just die off with asthma, bronchitis. I have chronic bronchitis. A lot of times I come into meetings with some of you and I have to leave out because if the air comes on and it was hot, now I'm coughing. I have to leave out. It's very aggravating and annoying. And it didn't have to be like that. But we went on, the early 2000s, then February 2020, my parents and I and my aunts, we had just been talking about reigniting this quest for answers from Dew Point about what happened and why so many people were sick. And so my parents, my two aunts, and I, we met because they're the only ones living. My two aunts were the only two out of the family living now. My Aunt Eva passed away, so now I have one aunt remaining and my mom and my dad. That's it. And so we met with the mayor, and he, basically stated that, it was private property. There's nothing we can do about it. So that's just the way it is. But of course, if you know me well, you know that I didn't take no for an answer. So, I kept going back, and eventually I went to Commissioner Ovita Thornton, who is the District 9 commissioner, and she let me know that, that there would be an opportunity to ask, for us to be part of this investigation that will be going on along with along with Dunlap Road. And so she advocated for that, and then we were able to be a part of that. And so as a result of being a part of that, we were, told that there's nothing wrong with y'all, there's nothing wrong with your land, there's nothing wrong with your soil. We had the same report from that lawyer that was hired that we had before, the information that we had before. And so eventually, with a lot of back and forth, the mayor eventually stated that he had met someone from the Southern Environmental Law Center, and her name was April Lipscomb. She was the lead attorney there. Awesome. So she came in. So first, my parents and I, we met with her in Atlanta because I wanted to be sure that she was going to come and really help our community and not give false hope before we started meeting. And, and she was excellent and gracious. And as a result of several meetings with our Pitted Road community, she was able to get an environmental firm to test our soil. And the results were startling. And we had high levels of PFAS in our water, so much that Nikki Jones, who was the city manager at that time, he called for a state of emergency. And so we had to stop drinking the water. It was a lot. So from that, we eventually were able to, people who were still on well water, not everybody was still on well water, but those who were, they were able to be connected to the city water. So, once we got, they got connected to the city water, we think, okay, there's hope. We're, getting the water cleaned up. Well, this building pops up across the street from our church. We're in daycare. We're in our summer camp, and we're watching this building come up. Nobody can tell us what the building is. We asked commissioners, what's the building? They couldn't tell us. Nobody knew. And I just didn't know I didn't think to go to the planning department. So, therefore, this went on for months of just not knowing. But eventually, I got into my routine with my babies and forgot all about it, and just moved on. Went to a meeting in Atlanta. And this lady stood up. It was, I went to a session. It was called Data Centers. I was just going because I like to learn new things, just being nosy. And so fast forward, find out this lady's talking from Henry County about how they are, putting this data center in Henry County, and all how it, the water, how it's damaging because of the water, because of the energy, all of the things that Olivia, shared. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, wait a minute. So I called Laura Ayer, who is I call her my community education buddy because we do a lot of workshop and training together in the community. I said, Laura, this lady is talking about something called a data center. Before I got home, Laura had researched it and found out that Boys Road was indeed a data center. So in September, we just went to work and reading, trying to learn everything we could about data centers. And then October, we had our first community data center meeting. We put it out there. Different residents came. We shared what we knew. Then we followed up in November with another data center meeting that was more action-oriented because we wanted to start working on maybe some ideas for some ordinances to present to the mayor, commission, planning, somebody, because we wanted to make sure that this didn't move so fast that, once again, our community lost. So we continued on that track, and then there was the planning director had before that, there was a meeting with the mayor commission. So they indeed created a moratorium to give the planning commission time to make sure that, they could have a plan together for the ordinances. And then we again work with the community on the background. And then when they finished that text ordinance, we on the Monday, we had until really a day and a half to look over it as a community once again. And we asked for several things. Main thing that we really wanted was, one, transparency. Some of that has been talked about tonight. We want to make sure that, that we know when there are data centers, requests coming up in our community. The one on Boys Road came up. Nobody knew what was going on. So part of what the Planning Commission put into their, at the end of everything, there was a Planning Commission meeting, and at the end of that meeting, one of the things that came out of it was that they suggested that that now all data centers will have to go through a special permit. So that was good for us because we want to make sure that whenever somebody applies for a data center permit, that the community knows that we have opportunity for public comment, and that also your mayor and commission knows, because it just wasn't right for that to go up like that and nobody knew what was going on. So the transparency and to start building the trust back up. Speaking of trust, it's community, making sure that we have a community team that will help to be an oversight for data centers requests as they come up. Just like we have for the bites and things like that, we feel that there needs to be one also for data centers so that, again, community will have opportunity to be engaged in that discussion. The other thing that we asked for that Olivia spoke about was we want to be able to know how much energy, how much water is being used. The water worked fine, but we did get pushed back on the energy. So we're still going back and forth on that. We'll see what happens with that and what the rules and what the laws are, that we know how much energy is being used. And the other thing was we want to make sure that we are benefiting. We want to know what these benefits are. As Olivia stated, a lot of times people say, well, when data centers come, there are you get taxes to your community. But on the flip side, money is tax, incentives are given to the people who operate the data centers. From what we understand, that this particular data center, there were no tax incentives, so they didn't receive anything, but the city itself has received about $200,000. So, again, what about community benefits? We want to make sure that communities who have to bear the most burdens, which in this case, it has been stated that the communities that are in the industrial zone, that is where the data centers will be. But we are fighting against that because we don't want data centers in our Black and marginalized neighborhoods only. And so that is just not right, and we will continue to fight that. But that is where it stands. That's where these data centers would be. Right there with us with the quarry, right there with us with the other data center, and that is just not right. So really, our community, we're saying we don't want data centers. And it's not because we are against technology, because it's the way of the world. We have to have it. But there has to be a balance. There has to be a concern for all residents in Athens. And it's just not right that we on the one side of town have to bear the burden of everything that has to go against us having good water, against us being in a way where we have to pay for energy. That is not right. So we want our leadership to choose people over profits. We want our leadership to ensure that they do the necessary research before they start going out here signing off on data centers. Because it's complex, y'all. The more that we think that we know, the more there is to these data centers. We don't even know what happens to these data centers. Like I read in one article how the lifeline could be between 10 to 15 years of that. So what happens to that big old data center in our community when they decide to pick up and leave? There are just so many uncertainties, and what we are asking our mayor, our commission, our planning commission, do your homework. Get some experts on your team. We appreciate all the work that they do technically, but this is so complex, they do not have all the answers. So don't be about ego and be playing with our lives out there in these industrial zones. We want you to know what you're doing, know what you're talking about. As Senator Eric stated, that we need to make sure, that we look at some of the legislation that's coming down. So let's take the time. Let's not rush. Let's look and see what is it going to be with the state anyway before we go out here making all these changes. So right now, where we are, and then I'm going to sit down. Because I'm very passionate about this, okay? But where we are right now, so we, 2 weeks ago, there was a meeting, a mayor and commission meeting, and agenda setting meeting where there would be on the agenda, I believe that we will be looking at another moratorium, just to make sure that they can, do the research. They have to frame it. I was looking at the meeting because I didn't make that meeting, but they have to frame it of why we need it and that kind of thing. But I believe that we are going to get that. On March the 3rd, that is when they're going to vote for either the ordinance or to expand the moratorium. So this is what the ask is. I'm only for community. I'm not even gonna lie to you, okay? Community, we need to be at the meeting. Even though we have some great commissioners, Commissioner Myers, Commissioner Link have been with us every step of the way, Commissioner Thornton, but let me tell you, we still need to be present. We cannot lose hope. Even though a lot of jargon is thrown at us and what can be done, what can't be done, we don't lay down and continue to allow our environment to be destroyed. We need to show up. If you can't show up, I'm always sending out Facebook posts. Every single mayor and commission meeting, I put up the meeting, I put up the link to how you make your comments, I put up the link to the agenda for you to click to see what the item is. Send the comment in. It helps when you flood their comment box. It helps when you call them. But we have to start taking charge of ourselves on a grassroots level. Data centers is just one part of the equation. So I thank you all for your time. Let's do what we got to do.
I won't make him introduce himself. Give it up for Peter Hubbard, Public Service Commissioner.
Hi, everyone. Yes, I'm Peter Hubbard, and I think there are a few slides, and if you want to put up what's relevant, I'm happy to speak to whatever's up on the screen. But what I want to do is just give you my perspective as a newly minted Public Service Commissioner. There's two. By the way, the Public Service Commission is a 5-member body, and it has been in one-party control for the last 22 years, I think, but we cracked that open last November. We've got 2 Democrats now on the commission. And we'll get a third this November because I'm going to put in the work to make sure that that happens because we haven't had representation at the Public Service Commission for a long time. And there are still decisions that are being made on behalf of you and I that I do not agree with at the Public Service Commission. And I'll tell you a little bit about that, but I just want to make sure that you know that I'm here to represent myself, not the commission. We don't have the majority yet, so I'm really speaking for myself. But the good news is that I am an energy expert. I have been living, eating, breathing energy my entire 16-year career now. I think about it all the time. I think about ways that we could we could do things better in this state. And I really want to put that expertise to practice. So I'm extremely pleased to be there at the Public Service Commission. You should also know that number 3 point, I was doing this as a volunteer for 6 years before I ever got the chance to run for office, because it's important to me that if we bring these clean energy resources that I know the market wants and that you all want, it will lower our power bills. Not overnight, but it will bend that cost curve downwards. And that's why I wanted to take the step to actually implement and be the change that I wanted to see at the commission. And it's a tough road to hoe, I have to tell you, but we're going to make it there. If there's another slide, that's just me. The better thing is to focus on what we can do at the Public Service Commission. I think the number one thing you should know, though, is that the Public Service Commission, it's really pretty simple. It regulates what you pay on your power bill if you're a Georgia Power Company customer, and I think most of you are. Or if you have a gas bill, the AGL, Atlanta Gas Light portion, that's under the control of the Public Service Commission, and we can decide how much that bill should be and where the energy comes from to supply your house. Those are kind of the two big things that we do as well, but there's a lot of other niche things as well. If you've heard of Hancock County, Sparta, there's an eminent domain decision there related to the takeover of private land for private benefit. It's an eminent domain case, not in agreement with it at all. But there are some niche things that we do. Heck, even regulating prison telephone lines, that's something that the Public Service Commission does. So if you've ever had someone that's incarcerated and you have to pay $10 a minute, not right. But that's what the Public Service Commission does. We still only have 2 Democrats on that commission, though, so I'll tell you about a big decision that took place just before I was seated, December 19th, when there were 2 lamed-up commissioners. They took a vote on certifying 10,000 megawatts of new generation, mostly for data centers. To put that into context, 10,000 megawatts would power every single household in this state. And we're building that for data centers. And unfortunately, the decision that was made was to do it mostly with natural gas-fired generation. And it's the wrong resource. They are more costly than solar, batteries, other things that we can do, especially making data centers more flexible. We don't even need to build all those power plants. If we just ask data centers to curtail their energy during peak periods for just a few hours, we can use the grid we have more efficiently, make them pay in their fair share, and use that to lower folks' power bills. The tricky part is what's their fair share, and that's where my oversight comes in. I can tell you that the transparency thing is a big issue, and we're not doing a good job of that. There's a trade secrecy veil that is very difficult to kind of punch through. And the name that was mentioned earlier, Patty, you have to be careful because they will throw the book at you. And she was charged with a felony. Thankfully, it was dropped. But we do have to be careful about kind of revealing too much. But I can look at that and I can tell you without giving details that I'm not convinced yet that data centers are paying their fair share. My concerns, and I have a lot of them, one is that we're building that 10,000 megawatts of new resources or contracting with a few resources that exist, but it's a huge, huge commitment for data centers that may not show up in the numbers advertised. And so there's a big risk that we build a bunch of assets and then they're not there to pay for them. Or if they do show up, that they don't stick around for the 45-year mortgage on some of these power plants, because as we were talking about, the technology changes really quickly. Dr. T was talking about maybe they'll be here for 10 years, maybe, but then they're going to move on at some point when those tax abatements go away. They've been getting a free ride on the sales and use tax, paying nothing into state coffers since they've came here in 2018. They're paying a little bit in property tax revenues, but those are often praised at a fraction of what it costs to build a data center. And there are some jobs that come along with them, construction jobs mostly. After they're built, it's a skeleton crew. So my real concern is that we're spending our ratepayer money to build resources for data centers, and they're not going to be paid for. And then the question is, who's left holding the bag? And I wasn't born yesterday. I've heard promises made that there's going to be downward pressure on rates. That's always the catchphrase we've heard. We heard that with Vogel, And instead of 60 to 80 years of downward pressure on rates, we got a permanent 25% increase on our bills, at least until I can do more about it. Even 2 years ago, we got promised a $3 discount on our power bill, and that got wiped out with a rate freeze last year. So there's promises that are made that are not kept, and it's my job to pay attention to that, let you know what's going on. And, I did fight last week. There was a motion to reconsider that 10,000 megawatts. I fought against it. It didn't pass, that motion for reconsideration. So they're going to march forward with it, but never say never. Even if a year from now, when the circumstances are changed, I will go back and revisit that, and it won't be too late. It'll take 4 or 5 years to build some of these things. So just pay attention to that. But we do need to finish the job and get that representation on the Public Service Commission that we haven't had in a while. I don't know if there's other slides beyond this one, but I mentioned a little bit about I should mention as well that the Public Service Commission it is sort of a ship of state that can be difficult to change. It's kind of like if you're a new football coach and there's legacy contracts, someone signed a few players up to play for the next 7-8 years. That's kind of what I'm stepping into as well. Decisions were made just before I got on the commission, and they're very difficult to overturn. Never say never, but it's difficult with only 2 out of 5. So there are slow changes that go along with this. That's fine. I think that's about it. But again, we oversee Georgia Power Company. They're incredibly powerful. They will say one thing, and then I go up and, I was actually, I'm still very much in favor of the idea of plug-in solar generation. So where basically you don't need the permit, you don't need permission from the power company to just generate a small amount of energy. They said they were okay with that, and they fought against that even. So it's just going to be a fight, and I hope that you all are aware that it's slow by design, but we do need people that are there speaking to the concerns that you all have about data centers. And on the topic of data centers, again, I'm not convinced that they're paying their fair share, and we do need to work on that. There are, without giving details, there's a number of contractual items that are supposed to be in there, but they can even be watered down. So when we say, hey, data centers, you have to sign a contract for 15 years so that, if we build this infrastructure, you're going to be around to pay for it. But then they'll say, but you can early terminate with only 2 years of those 15 years of fees. So, that's a loophole, and that was not supposed to be in a contract that I saw, but I saw that in at least one contract. So I'm still not convinced that what is being said publicly is truly the case. And that's why we're here to talk about data centers, is because there is a risk that we get left holding the bag. There is also the possibility that they can pay in. I mentioned a couple of things like data center flexibility. Data centers are deep-pocketed folks. They can pay their way. They can do things like, in fact, I'd really love to see a data center step up to the plate and subsidize putting community solar gardens or batteries in folks' houses to provide that resiliency. Data center could pay a good portion of that, and they get a credit for, reducing the energy consumption that they would then be adding to, and it's sort of a wash, but they helped offset some of your bills. There are things like that we can be doing that are really smart, that other states are doing. You then tie all those solar panels and batteries together. They can operate like a virtual power plant. You basically can provide the same resources without building a brand new power plant. And yet they're paying in their fair share. They're paying in what they should be. That can lower folks' power bills. So just know that there's a lot of solutions. We just need leaders that have the vision, that are paying attention to this, that see what other states are doing. That plug-in solar bill is not a new invention. State of Utah already passed it. We can do that here as well, but we just need the votes. That's why I'm so happy Eric's there as a Representative Gisler. We need a few more votes, though. Because it's a really tough row to hoe to pass legislation when you're in the minority, and it's not fun being in the minority, but we are going to get there, and we keep making the case that we can do right by the people of Georgia. I hope that we can earn your trust to do that. Are there any other slides beyond this? I just want to make sure. Yeah, I mean, I think maybe that was there are a few slides that may be beyond that, but I don't want to go on at length. I could talk all night about energy and data centers and all of that, but I do want to make sure that there's room for Q&A and just making sure that we can answer your questions, because I got a lot of information up here and I like getting it out and helping you understand what the lay of the land is. So with that, I'll turn it back over, but thank you for being here and being interested, being concerned citizens, and trying to do what's right for Georgia. And this is, if you've been around for a couple of decades, you might remember the big warehouse debate. We built out a bunch of warehouses, and now we have empty warehouses, and we're dealing still with the truck traffic and pollution around them. This is another iteration of that. We need to be smart. We need to be consistent, internally consistent with how we're doing things. We can't have tax abatements here and giveaways on the power and all of that over there. We need to be thinking about this comprehensively, and we can get this right with the right leadership. And I don't see that happening just yet, but I'm really hopeful that if we keep pushing, then we can get this right and do right by the people of Georgia. So with that, I just want to turn it over and make sure that you all have a chance to ask questions. Thank you.
All right, when you came in, we probably gave you an index card. If you have a question, you can hold that up and Hayden will come around and grab it for you. I can also give folks a few minutes to think of questions if they want to write them down. Okay, whoever feels like they can answer it, then I guess that's who can take the question. Yep, free for all. Unless somebody specifically put on here that the question is for someone. First question, why do data centers only stay for 10 to 15 years?
Well, I mean, actually every 3 to 5 years is about how long the life of one of these NVIDIA chips are until the next generation comes out. And so, they're constantly sort of being reinvented from the inside. It's largely just what they're doing. These data centers are just looking for the best venue. They come to Georgia because the land is cheap, and most importantly, the electricity is cheap, because about 60 to 70% of the operating cost is just electricity. So that's the primary goal, and that's why they're coming here. If we take away the tax abatements and we start actually making them pay their fair share, yeah, there'll be fewer data centers. Maybe that's a good thing, but they're going to go somewhere else as well. So, I mean, they're getting a sweetheart deal, and that's why they're coming here. And as for the 10 to 15 years, I mean, the data centers have been around for a while, but these large language models only really since November of 2022, so a little over 3 years. It's a really quickly evolving space, and we have no idea what it's going to look like even 3 years from now. So, I mean, it's just to say that they're going to stick around for 15 years, I'm skeptical. That's all.
I remember, this isn't me, I'm reading it. When computers were going to bring us a 4-day work week and save all the trees. What if we are wrong about needing AI? Can we build some resiliency into the AI buildup?
Eric, you want to take that? Oh, yeah, give me that one. I'm not really sure what's meant by resiliency there, but technology evolves, right? I've worked in technology for 25 years, and it changes. I didn't see AI come in the way that it has, and we can only kind of guess about what it's going to give us. I mean, you think about the future of AI, and you think about things like universal basic incomes are going to need to be necessary, because these systems are getting so smart that they can do a lot of the mundane tasks that nobody likes to do, right? I actually work for an insurance tech startup that's using AI to process 400-page long policy documents for commercial real estate insurance. So nobody wants to do that. The people who do that for a living right now don't like to do that, and they miss things all the time. So there's a lot of really good benefit. You hear about that. That's my own personal experience. You hear about biotechnical, biomed breakthroughs, things like that. Those are all good things. So we don't know if we're actually going to realize all those things. The future is uncertain, right? But I do think that, I don't know, I guess I'm more hopeful that maybe if AI has taken off some of those things that are more mundane tasks that people don't like to do, and it takes away some of those jobs, really kind of white collar jobs, maybe it lets us get back to doing other things with our time. I'm kind of hopeful about that. But I think whether that's going to happen is going to depend a lot on what kind of leadership we have. So, yeah.
Okay, I'll answer this question a little bit. So something that in the computational sciences we talk about is a concept called computational sobriety, which is the idea that not everything needs a computational solution. So as we move forward, I think it's important for all of us to think, especially scientists, but for everyone to think, do I need to use high performance computing to do this task? And that can play into a lot of how we're going to interact with AI and other emerging technologies. Is this necessary for this task? Scientists think about this. A lot of people who want to use ethical AI and use, small models like I talked about before that are specialized for research, we're thinking about this. We're thinking about, is this necessary? How can we best use the resources that we have? People who run large companies are thinking about making money. They're not thinking about computational sobriety. So I think that's an important thing to remember when you're being marketed AI products. Is this because it's very useful to me and it's going to improve my life, or is it because somebody wants to make money? So that's where I would say that. Yeah.
Good job.
What is a solar plug-in?
Oh, I can actually answer this one, and then I'll hand it off to Peter. So Peter mentioned that Utah passed a plug-in solar bill, and Peter actually came to the House Democratic Caucus breakfast a few weeks ago and talked to us and mentioned that. And it was almost like a race, to go back and talk to Peter. Hey, tell us more about that, because I want to drop a bill, right? And Representative Imani Barnes actually beat me to the punch. So when I reached out to Peter, he said, well, Imani is meeting with Georgia Power tomorrow. So, okay, well, I missed that one. I talked to her a couple of days later. All right, there's a whole story behind the legislative side that wasn't really the question. Plug-in solar. It's a couple of solar panels, maybe one or two. They plug into a micro inverter, is that what it's called? Yeah. And that has a plug that you plug right into your 110-volt socket. And I guess there are benefits if it's a dedicated circuit. I'll let Peter explain that stuff. But basically, yeah, you don't have to hire a contractor. You don't have to get permits. You just put out the solar panel, plug it into your wall, and it can take 10 or 15% off your power bill. They're actually legal in Georgia right now, and Peter could probably talk about this a lot better than I do, they're not really protected. The power company can come along and say, pass some rule or policy and say you can't use that anymore, right? And that's where I'll hand it off to Peter, because he's the expert.
I think you actually covered it. The idea is plug-in solar is you literally plug it into the power outlet. It is important to have a regular dedicated circuit without a washing machine or anything on it. That's really important, because if you have both load and solar pushing onto a 15 amp circuit, you can melt the wire, burn your house down. You don't want to do that. But that's the idea, though, is that you go to a Costco in Utah and you can buy 2 or 3 panels, a microinverter, plug it into your wall, and it will offset 10-15% of your power without having to go through a permit process. And it's as simple as that. It really is that simple. And it's just being fought by the power company, because that would be 10 to 15% less power they can sell you and me. And that's why they're against it. So. Well,
Shellby, do you want to go this way?
A follow-up question about
Yeah, go for it.
So within that setup, would that also be able to, if you're
running during the day and you're not at home, you're not using a lot of power, would that be able to send the energy to the grid, or is it just staying inside?
The idea is it stays within the house and just offsets your own consumption. And there should be two advice. That the microinverter will sense when the power grid cuts off, so it won't export any back if the power is cut off. So this isn't like a backup generator where you would have power if the power went off. If the grid goes down, you don't have power either. But also, there is something that basically, there might be a reason for an electrician to visit just to make that dedicated circuit and put a very simple device on your meter that allows it to stop any backflow, because that's the real concern. That's why, at least ostensibly, that's why the power company, the EMCs, are all saying, we don't want this because there's a danger that energy could flow back onto the distribution grid and fry a lineman. And that is a real risk. But again, those concerns, there's answers to those concerns. So any of the barriers they're putting up, we have answers to, and yet they don't want to do it because it's a money thing.
Next question, also about plug-in solar. Does it require state legislation or only a Public Service Commission rule change to allow plug-in solar in Georgia?
I mean, it's technically legal right now, but what we're trying to do is there's also 12 to 15,000 HOAs here that HOAs do not like solar. So this is a way to just say, look, this is legislated. You have the right to be able to farm the sun in the state where agriculture is the biggest product. And it also helps with, it is important to know where these are. And so a simple... not an interconnection process, but just a simple, hey, I have one of these, here are the kind of rules of the road. You need to have that dedicated circuit. Just identifying where they are. There's very simple things we can do, but we're trying to codify it into law so that everyone knows the lay of the land, the rules of the road. And that's, even though you can do it right now, we want to be safe about it. So these would be certified products that have been vetted. Right now, any old Joe Schmo can buy things off Temu and make a DIY plug-in solar, but that's not the safe way to do it. We're trying to do it the right way.
I did think of something to say on that, and then I forgot it. So, next question.
Will this affect all of Athens' water and electric bills? And then they're kind of putting like Athens-Clarke County and Oconee. And how do we prevent all attempts for new data centers?
Is it about data centers?
I think so. I think it's asking if it affects everybody in Athens and Oconee counties, their water and electric bills.
It's about electric bills, so I'm going to give it back to Peter.
I don't want to answer all the questions, but the water thing is more kind of local. The power thing is it really doesn't matter where the data center goes. It's gonna impact the way that we plan our electric grid here. Is all of Georgia, all of Alabama, and parts of Mississippi are all a big tight electric power pool. You could literally put a data center anywhere in there. And in theory, it would cause increased demand, but you can also then put that Beyonce clean energy resource anywhere in that footprint as well, and just tie it together contractually. So local impact on electricity, it's a little bit muted. It's really not that big of an impact except for building new substations or power plants in your backyard. Or I would say if a data center builds a bunch of backup generation, and then they start turning those on, then you get the local emissions from a diesel generator, which is not a good thing. So there are considerations around power. The biggest concern is just that we're building new infrastructure and the data centers may or may not be around to pay for it, so who pays that cost? That's where it can come on your power bill.
So I'll jump in also on the water thing real quick. Because that's a factor too, right? The data centers use a lot of power, but they also consume water, and that's changing a bit now. So the cheaper way to do it is you bring the water in, you cool your processors. It's heated water. A lot of it evaporates back in the atmosphere and it's gone, right? So it's just consuming water. But there are, and I think Olivia mentioned in her presentation, there are closed loop systems where that water is recirculated back, it's captured, it's not released into the atmosphere. But I've done some research too that where newer data centers, newer technologies are coming out because that's not a sustainable thing, right? The long term, the data center can't survive on that, right? But there are newer practices like immersion computing where the processors are actually submerged in like a glycol solution that doesn't even use water. So the industry's they're aware of the issue. They're working on things. And that's where I think like legislation around transparency can come into place because, right now we're giving away tax credits if you'll just build a data center, right? But if we condition tax credits on things like using the lower amounts of water up to nothing, I think that's a smarter way to go about it in the long run to try to encourage the industry to adopt those newer technologies. So,
I'm not sure if I understood the question, but as a community person, all I can envision is the fact that in Athens, the data centers that will likely be built will be built in our industrial zone. And if we know history, we can go all the way back to Red Line and we can, we know what it is. And so who lives in these industrial zones? Black people, marginalized people, low-income people. And so at the end of the day, unless there is consideration for not clustering these data centers, putting them all in the same place, although, yes, we have an industrial zone, but does that mean that we need to put all the data centers in this industrial zone? There may be an opportunity for some discussions around that because, as I stated earlier, one group of people should not be bearing the burden for the whole community. And I want everybody to understand when we talk about, will it hurt me? It might. It might not hurt you today. But what my desire and hope, which is outside of data centers, but just as a human being, is that we will stop thinking about, if it's over there with those people, if it's over there, we have to start thinking collectively. Because although it may start over here with these people, it might be in your neighborhood tomorrow. And so what we have to do is to work together collectively to make sure that any ordinances that are passed, any decisions, whenever the moratorium needs to end, all of that, we collectively need to be standing together saying, we don't want data centers. Why do we want data centers? We are the smallest county. What space do we even have for any more data centers? Really? How is it really benefiting us as community? So a lot of these questions go right over my head because all I'm thinking about is why do we need another data center? Why wasn't they transparent about the data center that went up and not even our commissioners knew about them? Now there's distrust within the community. Distrust. And so at the end of the day, there needs to be a lot more research. There need to be some professional people on board with our mayor and commission, with specifically our planning commission. It cannot be about egos. If we don't know, we don't know. It's new. Okay? It's new. So we're all trying to learn this together. So I think that there needs to be a different approach. And so I just want to emphasize that. You probably hear me say that over and over, but I mean it. So please hear me and join.
I don't have anything.
Well, this might be an Olivia question. Topic, water usage by data centers. Please explain use. Is it correct that 80% is evaporated? Is the remaining water polluted?
Yeah. So if a data center is using evaporative cooling, then yes, it's going to be evaporated. That's how it cools the computers, is by heating up the water so much that it evaporates. So that just uses up the water. When we talk about something like closed loop cooling, in that case, you're not evaporating the water. Instead, you're recirculating it throughout the system. And this does save water, but it doesn't necessarily save energy because you need to use more energy to cool the water again so it can be cool. And there still will be some wastewater released, and that water, yes, it is contaminated. Some of the contaminants could be PFAS, for example. And then what Eric was talking about with using like glycerol or something else to cool data centers, the reason that that is not particularly popular is because it makes the computations run 0.2 seconds slower.
Wow.
So that's why that's not being used. And yes, and again, for the computations that they're doing, saving these tiny amounts of time is something that people care a lot about. But if we made a rule that said you have to use glycerol cooling, they would figure out a way to make it faster anyway.
Would that glycerol cooling also have PFAS contaminants?
I am not sure what is included in the glycerol, so I don't want to say anything incorrect, but it would not be releasing water that contains PFAS out into the environment. So, yeah.
This one says for Peter Hubbard. Can you expand on the ongoing impact of Hurricane Helene on our power bills?
Yeah. So last week, Georgia Power Company filed two things. One is a fuel cost recovery docket. They've been over collecting since Russia attacked Ukraine in 2022 and gas prices spiked. And so now they're promising us, I think, a $1.23 reduction on the average monthly power bill. It's very generous. That's trickle-down economics. The other thing they offered filed was storm damage recovery from Hurricane Helene a year and a half ago. And the price tag is $912 million. So when we talk about, and you best believe that I'm going to make this case that there's a hidden tax on your power bill, not so hidden anymore, because here's a line item of a $912 million of continuing to put fossil fuel emissions out there, like this 10,000 megawatts I just told you about, the majority of which is going to be gas-fired generation. So we need to be making that connection that this is bad for business, this is bad for the environment, bad for public health, bad for our children by continuing down the same pathway of burning fossil fuels. We know that this is not the right way to do it. And there's an economic cost to that. And now we're starting to see those chickens come home to roost. That's a $912 million price tag that just dropped, and somebody's got to pay it. And I fear again that the votes won't go our way to push some of those costs back on the shareholders. So that's why we need to finish the job at the PSC.
What is stopping Georgia Power from passing on the cost of the $22.4 billion loan from the federal government to Georgia Power customers?
So for those that don't know, last Wednesday when that 10,000 megawatts got certified, magically a week later, the Department of Energy then financed a good portion of the debt part of it. And I'm of two minds. I mean, in a world in which I cannot stop those 10,000 megawatts, I'd rather us pay a lower price for it. What's happening is basically the other 49 states are going to help subsidize this big build out by lowering the cost of debt. So, I mean, thank you to the other 49 states, but I also wish we were not subsidizing the wrong resources. But that's what happened is it's like $21.5 billion to Georgia Power and another $4.5 billion to Alabama Power. That will lower the cost of borrowing debt from Wall Street, and it should lower the cost of this overall build out. Whether or not those savings get passed on, that's up to the Public Service Commission. And with the commission that we have right now, don't hold your breath.
Is Georgia currently planning to, or is it capable of, banning local bans on data centers? So I think does that mean the Georgia legislature?
Is the state government capable of banning
Local bans.
Double bans, like a meta ban? Theoretically, I think so. Legislatively, you could write state law that would prevent local, county and city governments from implementing a ban or a moratorium. There may even be some bills out there this year that aim to do that. But yeah, it's possible.
So we also should look at if the federal government can ban local bans. So I talked to some folks there a few days ago, and they said to keep an eye out for March 11th. There's going to be another executive order surrounding this issue that will give us more information. So that's a bit of a cliffhanger. But yeah, don't go home and forget about data centers. Stay on it.
Stay up thinking about data centers. This one says, for college students who are unaware of the changes being made regarding data centers and energy in Georgia, or feel it's irrelevant, how should we approach garnering their support for change?
Well, since I have the mic, I work a lot with some of the sustainability faculty over at UGA, and I'm talking about some outstanding students who want to do better for Georgia, and definitely for Athens. So I believe first, foremost, banning and working with those who are leading sustainability and environmental efforts right now, because they're right in the midst of it. These young people, they got the up-to-date knowledge. I like to keep a lot of them around me. So I believe that the first step is to, work with those entities that are already in place. Even going lower, even in our K through 12 settings, we have several faculty members who really promote environmental science over at Clark Central, over at Bernie Harris, over at Clark Middle. And I would say, bring community in as well as those who are at UGA in sustainability.
Yeah, I think that that advocacy is huge. Making sure people are aware, talking to them about the impacts of the data centers and how they work and all that kind of stuff. But once you get them motivated, get them to the polls, right? We got the party in power right now, the majority party. Yeah, they realize that they gave away a bunch of money for free in these tax credits. But that's a money thing. That's all they care about, right? They don't really care about economic or environmental justice that you're talking about. So yeah, I mean, we does everybody? This is a Democratic Party meeting in Clarke County. Raise your hand if you're aware that they've been in control for 22 straight years. Yeah, it's time to take it back. So get those college kids to the polls.
You can also you should talk about data centers all the time. I do this. I'm very popular, so I could tell you that it really helps you socially also. And you can tell all of your people that old, young, college, whatever, they can come join us with Coalition of Athens Scientists, and we will get you fired up on data centers, for sure.
All right, I'm shortening this one a little bit. Throughout the U.S. many, if not most, heavy process mills generate the power they use on site with power plants they build, own, and operate themselves. Can data centers be required to furnish the power they need themselves?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about our preferred way to do it is the Beyonce one. I still want to drop a Beyonce bill. I think it'd be amazing. But yeah, I mean, I think that's certainly a way it could be done, and I think that's probably more a legislative solution than a public service commission one. But obviously, we work together on that kind of thing. Yeah, it could absolutely be done. But again, we got to get those college kids to the polls, and we got to be in the majority to pass that kind of legislation, because I don't see the current majority party doing it.
That's another answer to this. So yes, in federal legislation, the president does want data centers to have their own unregulated power plants. So data centers having their own power plant is not necessarily good. It could be good, but it could not be good, because I don't know if I don't want an unregulated power plant next to me either. Yeah, exactly. So I think, and that's like what happened with Memphis, what they had their illegal methane gas turbines to power the data center. So I think we want to keep that in mind. Like maybe that would help your bills, but it might not really help anything else. So just keep that in mind.
Okay, we're actually running short on time, so I'm going to ask 2 more questions, and if I didn't get to yours, it's actually because I couldn't read your handwriting, and because we're running short on time. But maybe these folks will stay around just a little bit and answer your questions individually. So one of them is there a health hazard, a potential health hazard for the community nearby?
Yes, there are potential health hazards. So one hazard would be with any unknown contamination from the waste of the data center. Another one is noise. Persistent noise can cause health issues. So if you're living very close to a data center, you're subject to that noise. It can cause health problems. Science for Georgia is working on a noise study specific to data centers that will be coming out. So that's another thing to stay tuned for. So those are the 2 major health issues. This also can be light pollution. And again, if you're having water issues, that could cause health issues as well.
How can citizens pressure / give input into the Public Service Commission for change? Is it only via state legislation?
No, I mean, the Public Service Commission, it's right there in the title, Public Service. We are there to serve you. And even though I had to live in one of 3 of 159 counties to qualify, I served the whole state. You can reach out to me anytime if you want to talk about data centers and what we can do or not do just yet at the Public Service Commission. But we have the ability to tell them how much they're going to pay and what kind of energy they're going to use. And those are 2 of the biggest concerns. But we have to have other public service commissioners who believe in that. And right now, we don't have that right now. So, I mean, that's the challenge is I'm kind of butting heads with making as many persuasive arguments behind the scenes as I can to try and convince one other commissioner to come along with the 2 that we have now. It's not easy, but just know that my email and phone number, and I've got some cards. I can give you my personal cell phone number if you ever want to talk to me. I'm always open to it. You know how to get a hold of me. I'm right there on the website as well. Just reach out, and I'll happy to have. Yeah. What's your follow-up?
Oh no, actually, I just wanted to give an update to the local ordinance that just has come through.
An official announcement from Commissioner Carol Myers. Breaking news.
Other people are going because the data center text amendment, which basically means the ordinance to sort of control how we zone data centers, is on the agenda for Tuesday. However, we also have a moratorium that is now, continuation of the moratorium that is now listed on the agenda that we'll be voting on. Okay, so that means that there's actually an opportunity to, I mean, most likely, I don't see any reason why this is better. Actually, I will not be at the meeting, but I am certain. It's all related to grandchildren. But there was the moratorium most likely will go ahead and be voted on probably. You know, I anticipate that there'll be a lot of support for that. But the data center amendment is still on the agenda, which means that you can still talk to that. So if you review that and see what's on there and see what kind of changes or what you'd like to encourage us to do, because most likely what will happen is that amendment, that text amendment, will go back to the Planning Commission, or we will vote on with some changes either in, what is the next month, April or May. So you can still make comments on that text amendment and then say, please support that moratorium and extend the moratorium. So if you need to understand that better after I sit down and after the meeting, please come and talk to me. But I just wanted to know that I just saw that. I just got that text message.
Carol, a follow-up?
Yeah, I'm wondering, there's another election for Public Service Commission, right, coming in November? If we flip that seat, is there a chance that some of the stuff that we passed on the last one, on the 10 megawatts, can be changed?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, we could go, think about it, we could go from 0 out of 5 commissioners that are Democratic to a majority in 1 year's time. And then when we do that, not if, it'll be 4 years of having Democratic majority on the Public Service Commission. So there'll be a rate case, there'll be a long-term power plan, and yes, we can claw back on some of this bad spending. It'll take a few years to build these power plants, and there's some real dogs in the mix, and I'd like to see some of those taken out for us to do more of the clean energy resources that we know these data centers. It's just good for business. They also have clean energy goals. And if we're building the wrong things for them, that's another reason why they won't stick around beyond 10, 15 years or even less, because they're going to go where their own corporate goals are pushing them. So they're never say never. Some people said it's game over once they're certified. I disagree. And until they're built, and even after they're built, we don't have to operate them. I'll just give you, there was a question very quickly about like youth and bringing them in. There is always hope. We can always reverse these bad decisions. And I just point you towards Texas, a deeply red oil and gas heavy state that is going gangbusters with solar and batteries because it makes money and it's cheap to do. And we could do that here in sunny Georgia. So we can definitely reverse it.
And I just want to add on the tail end of that, you asked about the electoral side of things. Peter does have to run again next year. And everyone in the state votes for all 5. Yeah, this year. I keep saying that. I got to run this year too. So. But yeah, he's got to get reelected in November. And like he said, he kind of mentioned it quickly, but everybody in the state votes for all 5 public service commissioners. So he's going to be on the ballot. And then I think my personal, not my favorite, was the opposite. The one that I don't like the most, what's her name? Pridemore.
Queen of Me.
Yeah, Queen of Me. Pridemore. She is also, her seat is up this year, and she has stepped down because she thinks that she's won enough fans to run for Congress, I think. So there's not going to be an incumbent in that seat, so there will be 2 on the ballot this year, right?
That's right.
So remember.
We're actually at time. Yeah, for the rental. But I want y'all to come up here and talk to them about your questions because I have to start cleaning up. Also, somebody announced to me that the steps outside are slick, so y'all should be careful when leaving. And yes, local election. Do what? Oh, and Olivia wants you to take her flyers on data centers so that you can keep thinking about them. Okay, so vote May 19th if we don't see y'all before then. And then vote in November for Eric and Peter.